Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. We hope all of you had a fantastic Christmas holiday week and are looking forward to the New Year's celebration. Agriculture, of course, we are not just an American industry, we are a global industry, and our input suppliers are global as well. One thing I always like to see is when we've got folks from those input suppliers who can also put boots on the ground and know what it's like to put a crop in or perhaps take one out. Well, this past harvest season, our very own Chad Colby had a chance to visit a farm in rural Illinois where he worked with one of the CEOs of one of the world's largest ag input suppliers, who was back on the family farm helping with harvest.
Energizing, therapeutic, I don't know what the right word is, but I can tell you I enjoy it.
Syngenta CEO Jeff Rowe leads the company from Switzerland, but he makes sure he comes back to the family farm in Princeton, Illinois every year at harvest.
This is home, yeah. This is where I grew up. The original Rowe farm is down by Henry, Illinois, and that farm Rowe started farming that in about 1830. So we've been in Illinois for a very long time. I'd be a fifth generation farmer here, and my son is on the farm. He's running the cart today. He'd be a sixth generation farmer.
Jeff says the innovation he has seen in agriculture in his lifetime is incredible.
You know, we're talking about innovation for machinery, genetics, chemistry, biologicals, the drone, digital space. What I tell young people that are interested in agriculture, it's such a broad area, you can't even imagine the amount of innovation that's coming this way. We can now show in the field, like the impact of fungicides, for example. You could go across the field, you could see it on the yield monitor you talked about, you could see it in the aerial pictures that you take with drones, that you could see that product is creating real value for the farmer. And I think our ability to make those decisions easier, simpler, more straightforward is part of our job and others in the industry. You've got the ability to control, pretty much all aspects of the combine, the machine as you're going through the field. We've got GPS, of course, set up, and we're able to track through the field with the cart. My ability to track what's going on the farm remotely. If I'm in, some airport somewhere, far stretches of the world, I'm able to pull up the system and find out exactly what's going on the farm. So there's a lot of things that have changed. I guess the last thing that I didn't mention earlier is the capacity. We're running a 12-row head here, and we're moving through this corn fast. Just able to cover a lot more ground in a much shorter amount of time.
Jeff has had the opportunity in his career to interact with farmers all over the world. While there may be some cultural differences, he says at the core, they're very similar.
When I talk to a farmer in India that's maybe a smallholder farmer, it's not so different than talking to a farmer in Champaign, Illinois. They're thinking about the same thing. They're worried about the land, they're worried about the yield, they're thinking about the next generation. So from that standpoint, I think we're kind of all starting from the same spot. I think what is really exciting about digital and the data connection is that we have the ability now as a company to interact with hundreds of millions of farmers because of our ability to use tools. Almost every farmer in the world has, no matter what their economic situation is, has a phone of some sort or access to information. So we could get very complicated messages to them, we could get very simple messages to them. And that's different. It used to be the only way that you could get to that many farmers is you had to have boots on the ground. You had to have an army of salespeople and agronomists out interacting with farmers. Now we can do it through a digital connection. And it's not just hey, how are you doing? Is it harvest time? It's, hey, we think that there's a reason for you to go out and apply an insecticide, or we think there's a reason for you to go out and apply a fungicide, or it's time to plant. These are real decisions that are important to farmers. The digital connection allows us to scale it at a much broader level.
Thank you, Chad, for that story, and thanks to Jeff Rowe for taking the time to talk to us. One of the great things about my personal position in this world of agriculture is the fact that I get to meet lots of neat people around the country. A year or so ago, I had the chance to meet Andy Dole. He's a farmer from Central Illinois, and we got to work on a panel presentation. Some of you may know Andy, perhaps not by his name, but by his social media handle, A Trippy Farmer. He's out there communicating with folks all year long.
My family and I work together here in South Central Illinois, Mattoon to be exact, to grow corn and soybeans primarily on our 6th generation farm where we've been for quite a few years.
In addition to his work in the field, Andy has spent the past several years telling the story of his farm on social media. Through short videos, he's taught viewers about the kind of work that happens on a modern farm.
I do believe individually on our farm it may not be the highest priority to advance our own operation. However, from a national and global scene, it's incredibly important, especially with today's politics, social media, to have a strong presence out there to represent what the everyday farm is like. Again, it may not help us when it comes to expanding our farm, acquiring new land, yet I do believe that it is a net positive for everyone because it shows what we do every day, that we're not big ag, we're not corrupt, we are actually taking care of the land, making the best agronomic and economic decisions for our family to help continue our own success and legacy.
First 70 acres done, filling now. Sometimes it's hard logistically because you can't always make it down and back and you'd rather just not run out and load early. I've got a nozzle over here that's putting out really big droplets as if it's plugged or leaking or something.
I think being frugal and yet capturing opportunities at the same time is something that we can take a lot of credit for over the years. Although I'm a young gun here on the operation, I think a lot of what's built this has not been my efforts. As we move forward, we'll continue to spend our dollars wisely, especially with lower commodity prices, to help build our farm and sustain it, hopefully for generations to come. I can't say that I'm terribly optimistic looking at the spreadsheets for 2025. Grain prices are down, yields are consistently average to slightly higher every season. I think we can find hope in that. I don't know on the grain department what's going to happen. We found to spend our dollars wisely, we need to work with great companies like Syngenta to provide quick ROIs on different products in our lineup, whether that be seed treatments, crop protectants, fungicides, herbicides, you name it. We need to maximize yields with the best dollar spent.
He has nothing to say for once in his life.
Nothing to say. It's been a long day of harvest.
It's only 2 o'clock.
True. We're still plugging along. Family stopped by. Lenny got this out to do some light reading. I don't know why he would. I've probably put 600 hours on this tractor. I've never read this thing. Do people read these? What did it even tell you?
Part of ensuring that legacy continues is finding quality partners and local experts to count on. Andy's family has worked with their local Syngenta team for years.
We've actually worked with Syngenta prior to me ever even returning home from college. I can remember being in college, being in high school, working with the on-ground team here at the local level with Syngenta, our rep, Tim Walsh, the different agronomists we've had over the years, the days of Lexar into Acuron, products we've used for decades at this point. We've got nothing but great things to say about their portfolio, their team. It doesn't matter what you're looking at. I really do think that they have top of the class products across the board. There are other companies that do have some good offerings, yet if you're looking for an entire portfolio of crop protectants, I think Syngenta is the best choice.
Despite this year's downturn in commodity prices, Andy remains optimistic about the future, both for his farm and for the industry.
I'd like to say that I'm an eternal optimist in the fact that every time we line up, we plan for a new year, regardless of prices. I'm expecting 300 bushel corn and 100 bushel soybeans. We've yet to hit those marks on anything, but that doesn't discourage us from trying and managing things in a way that allows that to happen. In 2025, we look to be as efficient as possible with our high dollar inputs, whether that be NP and K, crop protectants. I think that the opportunity is there every season to bring in those big yields. We just need cooperation from Mother Nature. I do think that everything is in line every year. We just need the dominoes to fall in a row. So my optimism gives me hope that maybe this year will be the year we crack the threshold on the high yields.
Thank you, Andy, for that conversation. And we hope, too, that 2025 is the year you do break those thresholds on those very high yields. We appreciate the time. Folks, stay with us. We're going to have a lot more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. There are many issues confronting the industry as we look forward. Of course, market prices are one, government policies are another, but for so many in the industry of agriculture, one of the ongoing issues remains labor. Later on in the program, we'll bring potentially some solutions to that issue.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg Solier joins us now with a look at what's coming from a weather perspective. And ordinarily, Greg, when you talk to us, you tell us what's coming from the sky. But I understand you want to start by talking about how the soil moisture profile is setting up this winter.
As they say, boots on the ground from the weather guy's perspective here. And it's just a general summation of the drought monitor, the highlights or the lowlights here as we wind our way through the end a couple of days of December. And you can see a pretty wide and expansive area of the country looking at unusually dry soils, whether you have snow on the ground or they're locked in good and tight. And many locales don't have a significant frost or freeze in them quite yet, but running from the northeast to New England into the southeastern states, we have some issues here with extreme dryness and drought. Same with parts of the northeast to New England. Still over parts of the northern plains, we have had remarkable improvement over the southeastern plains of late. Still some issues in West Texas and New Mexico, small area of the Pacific West. Many a year we've talked about extreme dryness and drought out there, and this is pretty much the story through the uppermost Midwest and the northern high plains areas. So that's the way we see things here for the conclusion of 2024. We'll take a peek going forward here in the weeks to come now.
Well, let's take a peek. Let's talk 2025. Greg, month of January, how do you expect temperatures to set up across the country?
You know, we've been advertising this transition, a rapid one, from El Nino to a neutral state, now into a what we think is going to be a fast, quick, if you will, moderate La Nina setup. And here it is. Yeah, kind of a shockaroo to the system, this Arctic air that has been bits and pieces of it back and forth. We think it'll become more dominant and steadfast through the northern plains. We had a sliver of that here a couple of weeks ago, but still some ongoing warmth relative to, you know, almost early to midwinter over the eastern states of the month of January. The trough was over the western and northwestern reaches of the country. So we get this set up with, again, the trajectory of weather systems bringing probably some organized snow, some snow that will certainly impact outdoor work and livestock operations, and livestock too for the northern and central plains. Corn Belt locales, more normalized moisture. That will include snow and rain and ice over the southern sections of the Corn Belt. A little drier than you'd like to see through the Gulf Coast areas. Normal precip over the southwestern reaches of the country, and more snowpack for the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies.
How do these temperature changes start to shift as you get into the month of February, Greg?
It doesn't. We think we're going to go through wintertime here in this kind of lockdown, very cold main motherlode of Arctic air poised over the northern tier states here. Some warmth still lingering, if you will, relative to the month of February over the southeastern part of the country. Temps are going to vary greatly desert southwest across the Corn Belt locales because we have an active storm track into the northern and central Rockies. Much of the plains, additional drought relief, much of the Corn Belt as well. That'll come in the form of organized snows, drier down through Florida, parts of West Texas, and the southwestern sections of the country too.
What about March? Greg, do you start to see any warm up for most of us as you look at March?
Not really. We think it's going to be a kind of protracted winter season around here. Look at the cold locked in here. It'll ebb and flow, but over just about the northern half of the country, warm still positioned here. Again, locked down into this moderate but quick La Nina setup. So the storm track is active. Severe weather as you'd expect over Dixie. Organized snows for the upper Midwest and a busy weather pattern too for much of the Pacific Northwest.
The soybean market here in the United States has been rocked by a series of news headlines that have reduced the value of that commodity on the international markets. Whether it's claims of potential tariffs coming down the line or slowdowns on biofuel production or perhaps increased foreign feedstocks being used for biofuel consumption, all of those things have hurt demand for soybeans, not just domestically, but on the international market. The American Soybean Association keeps a watchful eye over these sorts of issues and how they could impact the overall bottom line of American soybean producers. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Josh Gackel, who's serving as the association's president. He and his family farm in North Dakota, and I asked him, what is he most watchful for as this new Trump administration takes shape?
Well, we certainly have a history with what some of the trade issues that happened in the previous Trump administration with the tariffs that were put on China and the retaliatory tariffs that came back on U.S. soybean producers, amongst other products. We saw pretty significant price declines at the time from where the market was at. Right now, we're at at a lower starting point with prices, and an additional trade war and some of the more aggressive tactics that are being thrown out there and talked about, I think the ramifications in farm country would be pretty severe. So trying to remind the administration, Congress, as they tackle some of these important relationship issues with China, that agriculture can be a bright spot. Let's try and avoid any further damage to our egg trade and our egg markets. China is such a large market, just the percentage, close to 60% of U.S. soybeans go to China. You can't replace that overnight, no matter all the investments and work that we're doing in other places in the world. So just to be mindful of the ramifications and potential negative impacts on the farm.
One of the markets that ASA I know has been cheerleading for some time, and we're seeing it pay off for American soybean growers, is domestic biofuels, renewable diesel. Do you see opportunities on that front as you look to the future?
Again, it's one of those issues. It seems like most of what we work on, there's always opportunities and there are always challenges. So we see the same thing in the biofuels area. The IRA bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, included the 45Z clean fuel production credit. Still waiting for complete definition from Department of Treasury on what that's going to look like and how farmers can put those practices into place on our farms. What we've been asking for is flexibility. A farm in North Dakota is very different than my friend Caleb Ragland, who farms in Kentucky, and the farm practices he can use that I may not. I may not be able to bundle cover cropping and no-till in the same year in order to qualify for the program. So just urging USDA, EPA, and Treasury as they kind of coordinate that effort to maintain some flexibility and give farmers the opportunity to participate. And then renewable diesel, we're working very closely in California as well, the largest market for domestic renewable diesel with their low carbon fuel standard. They came out with a rule recently that they finalized. We've expressed concerns throughout the whole process. They put a 20% cap on veg oils, including soybeans, canola, other veg oils. Just really limits U.S. producers' opportunity to participate in that market. And not a lot of science or facts around how they came to that number. It seems more political or societal, which sometimes important as well. But farmers can play a major role, U.S. producers a major role in providing clean fuels to that market and other places out on the West Coast. So hoping they continue with that.
Thank you, Josh, for that conversation. I can tell you he's not the only soybean grower I've spoken with in recent months concerned about this incoming administration's focus on biofuels. Their support remains an open question, but it would do a lot of good to help draw down the stockpile of both beans and corn in the countryside. Leave it right here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we return. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. We've got some news that is going to impact livestock producers and meat eaters. Every 5 years, the U.S. government releases their dietary guidelines. And while the full text isn't out yet, we did get a proposal recently, and it has caused some consternation. Joining us now to talk about it is Dr. Shalene McNeil with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Dr. McNeil, fill us in on what this proposal for dietary guidelines would have done for meat consumption.
That's right. This committee, the Scientific Advisory Committee, has released their advice to the agencies. And what they've suggested, and we're baffled by this, is that we cut back the amount of red meat that we're eating in the diet. Despite the fact that we have a wealth of research to support the valuable role that beef plays in heart health and managing your weight and closing nutritional gaps, this committee seemed to have ignored all that evidence, almost to get the conclusions that they were looking for. In fact, there's a term for this in nutrition science. It's actually called confirmation bias, where we interpret the evidence with the outcome that we're looking for. And I think one of the concerns is, as a registered dietitian, that really takes us in the wrong direction, because what we've seen over the last 40 years as we've cut back on our beef intake is that we've seen obesity has gone on the rise, diabetes, and we're starting to see nutrient gaps that beef can help close. So cutting back on beef isn't going to be the way that we're going to get America healthy again.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you brought up a phrase that I haven't heard before, Dr. McNeil, and that's nutrient gaps. Could you explain what that is and how that impacts those who might not be consuming enough red meat?
Well, there's growing evidence now. We're actually starting to see more and more research that even right here in the United States of America, we have rising rates of nutritional deficiency. And that's what I call nutrient gaps, where we're not quite meeting the basic nutrition that we need. And some of those key nutrient gaps are nutrients like iron and zinc and choline and B vitamins. Those are the exact nutrients that beef can provide. We've actually had research even in the last couple of months in pregnant women and teenagers and older Americans showing that if we eat on average just about 2 ounces of beef per day, so it doesn't even take a whole bunch of beef to close those nutritional gaps, we're much, much more likely to get those critical nutrients that we need. And I think that's not being talked enough about. We talk so much about overnutrition, but we really don't spend enough time talking about the fact that there's still many Americans, especially vulnerable populations, that aren't getting the basic nutrients that beef can provide.
Dr. McNeil, now I'm asking you to generalize a little bit, but is that often because when folks are going and consuming, in particular, I'd imagine plant-based or processed foods, we're eating a lot of what we call empty calories? Is that kind of the challenge that we're facing there?
That's exactly right. In fact, as a registered dietitian, dietitians often call this nutrient density, where we talk about getting a lot of nutrition for the calories that you eat, getting more nutrition bang for the calorie buck. And beef is one of the most nutrient dense foods that you can choose from. So sure, vegetables and fruits have lots of vitamins and minerals in them, but they're different than what you can get from beef. And that's why we need a balanced diet. So beef is really nutrient dense. That's the exact opposite of empty calories. So right now, Americans are probably eating too many empty calories and need more nutrient dense foods in their diets.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned a balanced diet is always an approach, but I've heard a lot recently from folks who are really going all in on red meat, the carnivore diet, I've heard it called. Has there been scientific research to back up some of the claims we're hearing from this side, and was it just ignored by the Dietary Guideline Committee?
Well, I think one of the things that was ignored is that you can eat beef daily as your protein of choice in a heart healthy diet, in a diabetes prevention diet, in a weight management diet, and you can see great health benefits. That's with everyday beef consumption, 2 to 3 times the amount that the average American is eating today. And I think part of the interest in the carnivore diet and these very high meat diets is because consumers are seeing positive health effects when they're doing that. Now, the research still needs to be done. I think that there's a need for more research to really validate this. Many consumers find that eating only meat in their diet, even ranchers might find that eating only beef in the diet is just a little bit much because we like to include a lot of different things in our diet. But I think the point is that we really do need high quality protein sources like beef in the diet. We can probably eat more than a lot of Americans are eating today. We can cut back on our refined carbohydrates when we do that. And a lot of people see very positive health benefits with that. And there's good research out there to show that higher protein, lower carbohydrate diets can have a great impact. And I think this is something that the committee just didn't really spend enough time looking at this evidence and didn't really give it enough credit when they were putting forth their advice.
So now they've put forth their advice, and now luckily we as Americans have a chance to comment on that advice. Dr. McNeil, tell us a little bit about what's the best way to encourage the true dietary guideline folks to reevaluate these initial assessments.
Well, I think one of the steps is to hear from the public and having communication like we're having today, just to raise these issues, that this just doesn't make sense. These guidelines, these recommendations seem to be out of touch with what everyday Americans are looking to do. People are just struggling to eat healthy diets. They don't need to be told what not to do. They need encouragement on things that they can be doing that we're doing right. And weighing in, there's opportunities for the public to weigh in with public comments through dietaryguidelines.gov. NCBA has been very involved. It's a long, drawn-out process, and NCBA has been involved since the beginning, providing research to this committee. We'll continue to stay very engaged as this report goes into the Health and Human Services and USDA leadership to begin looking at, does this science, does this advice make sense? Can we reevaluate some of these components of beef? And so we want to continue to stay engaged, and we will, with oral comments and public comments, and we'll stay engaged as NCBA, but the public can get involved as well. Stay in touch with us at ncba.org or give those public comments through dietaryguidelines.gov.
Fantastic, folks. Check that out. The dietary guidelines impact a lot more than just folks' opinions. Get on there, make those comments. Dr. McNeil, thank you so much for filling us in on the impact these potential dietary guidelines could have.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Happy New Year to you as we transition from the old year into the new one. I'm pleased to be able to join Mr. Mike Pearson this weekend and to have a special guest joining us. We like to visit with Mark Stock as we change the page on the calendar and go to a new year to reflect back a little bit, to be sure, but then do a little bit of crystal ball gazing. Mr. Stock, how have you been?
Oh, Max, I've been doing fantastic. It's so good to see you.
Well, we always appreciate the chance to tap your brain a little bit and to get a read on a very shifting landscape here in agriculture. As we've seen a major political shift nationwide, we're wondering about all of the things that could impact agriculture, yet we're coming into a new year with a still challenged farm economy. First of all, what's equipment been doing here of late? We've seen excitement over used equipment, but then that shifts a little bit too. Tell us about what you're seeing right now.
Well, in the equipment market, it has been a different year. Let's talk tractors first, Max. In 2023, we sold just under 5,000 tractors on our website. And in 2024, we're selling about 3,800. So we've got a little bit of a loss in the number of tractors being sold. And that's primarily because the commodity prices have dipped down, and some of these farmers, they don't want to sell their equipment because they think the market is going to drop off. But what has happened though, Max, is because of the slow or the smaller number of tractors hitting the market, it's actually helping hold the market up. It has dipped a little, and it's a lot to do with where it's located. So if you're in certain parts of the country that had a poorer crop, it's not going to sell as well as those that had a better crop. But now, due to the worldwide audience of online bidding, that has balanced out somewhat, but it's still a little bit softer in those areas. Combine, same deal. We sold about 1,025 combines in 2023, and we're selling just under 800 of them here in 2024. But the market has been kind of unique. The combines that sold in July and August, that was kind of the low in the market. And then as harvest started, and folks seen that they had some better yields in area, even though the price of corn has dropped considerably, the combine market has gone up. In fact, on a retirement sale here December the 10th by Fremont, Nebraska, a 2023 John Deere S780 two-wheel drive machine with about 400 separator hours brings $395,000. But in September of 2024, combines with the similar hours were bringing anywhere from 380 to 378. So it's gone up just a little bit since that time.
There were some surprisingly good yields that some of our producers had, fortunately, and that maybe lifted spirits just a little bit there. What's happening as you take a look at the land situation now? As you reflect back on 2024 and what was going on, did you continue to see somewhat of a plateau there? Prices didn't fall too much, did they?
They didn't fall too much. The first land that took the hit was the lesser marginal producing soils. They dropped a little bit, but it still wasn't a dramatic number. In fact, Sullivan Auctioneers, our sister company, just a couple weeks into November, sold some land by Macomb, Illinois for $23,500 an acre. This was really good Class A soils with a productivity index of just about 142. So it was about as good as you're going to get. And there was plenty of bidders and buyers hunting and looking for that particular land, Max. And in Nebraska, land, it's kind of funny how it works. Illinois land brings $23,500, and the best soil in Nebraska, we sold some in Hamilton County, Nebraska. That's by Aurora, Nebraska. That brings $14,800, and that was pivot irrigated farmland.
Pivot irrigated, sure. You would expect it to be in that part of the world, I presume. From the standpoint of the future in that land market going forward, you look at interest rates easing a little bit. You wonder about commodity prices. If they don't improve, what do you expect to see in terms of land prices? Could we see a little more slippage here?
I don't predict that we're going to see a lot of slippage because of the scarce amount of land that is being sold. Land is still in some very good, solid hands. We are seeing a large number of the folks that own land, though, reaching certain ages where when they pass away, it's passed on to their children. and their children, if they have been out of the farming or moved away a number of years back, they want to sell that land because they are detached from it. But you hit the nail on the head though, Max. Commodity prices and interest rates are still a prime consideration for the end user market in buying farmland. There's still plenty of investor groups that want to buy land and hold it because you still get that 7.25% appreciation year over year over a 40-year run. So they still, as the saying goes, land is still the best investment on earth.
Finally, at the last minute here, some of the lenders are injecting a word of caution this winter about how things might have to shift a little bit. Could that put more land on the market and maybe hold a lid on prices a little bit there, simply because of the volume of land that might change hands?
Well, and that's a good point. You know, in the COVID days, Max, when there was a scarcity of machinery, a lot of people were buying equipment, and now the equipment that they purchased was setting all types of record highs because of the scarcity of what was available. And now some of those balance sheets aren't looking quite as favorable because the market had to correct. And those are the folks that are having their conversations and renewals right now with their lenders. And most of the times I tell people you should sell machinery before you sell land because you can't get that land back when it comes up for sale. But we are having quite a few conversations with a lot of folks that want to sell off some of their machinery going into the beginning months of next year, just to help clear up their balance sheets.
We sure appreciate the time with you always, sir. We always are able to learn something from you. You folks at Big Iron and Sullivan Auctions, we hope you have a great year. What's the best way to find you, by the way, Mark Stock?
Well, if you just go to bigiron.com or sullivanauctioneers.com, you'll find links to us where you can send us emails, or you can find our phone numbers and give us a call. And we're so happy and glad of all the customers, the bidders, the buyers, the sellers, and of course you, Max, in helping us support these farm families as they sell land and machinery throughout the year, marketing them on your broadcast.
We sure appreciate it. Take care of yourself. Happy New Year, Mark.
Happy New Year.
There's more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. Greg Solier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg Solier talked about the pockets of the American countryside that are dealing with both extreme and exceptional drought. He rejoins us now, Greg, to give us a perspective as you look forward here on this drought. What do you think the impacts will be?
Well, at least over the rest of the wintertime season, there are going to be areas of the country, certainly based on snowfall, snow cover, and precip as well, in the warmer climes of maybe some drought improvement. Yeah, we keep track of that during the course of the wintertime season, going forward into early spring fieldwork opportunities. So improvement on what's going to be a pretty busy storm track with a La Nina weather pattern going underway. That's cooling of those waters, by the way, in the central Pacific. So more moisture for the northern Rockies, Pacific Northwest will add to the snowpack and snow cover over this part of the country. A little change to soil moisture in this ribbon from the Great Basin back into the mid-Atlantic region. We do foresee, after some modest improvement, worsening dryness and drought here. Drought continues down through Texas after some recent gains in Oklahoma, a little worsening there. Same over the southwestern reaches of the country. So opportunities for early season field work here, and probably not much early access into the northern and eastern Corn Belt locales and north from there.
All right, Greg, let's take us a little further into springtime. As you look at early spring, what is your temperature expectation right now?
That cold air, which is going to be a pretty rough 60 to 90 day spell of some winter weather, quickly begins to build back northward into the Canadian prairie, a bit below average and cool soils, and so it's probably a slow snow melt, and that's okay from a flooding standpoint. Red River Valley in the north, for example, warmth over this particular part of the country, and early season warmth down through the Delta and southeastern states, where there should be early access to the back 40 here. Still dry over the regions of Texas, the southwestern reaches of the country. Busy weather pattern in this trough position here. Pacific Northwest, northern plains, much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt. Late season snows into the northeast and New England as well.
As we get towards that mid-spring time frame, Greg, do you see any big swings in that temperature profile?
A general improvement, warming, if you will, of soils over the west and southern Corn Belt down through Dixie as well. This will be probably an early access and early and often opportunity for field work here. Look at the warmth gathering steam over the western reaches of the country, and temperatures about normal throughout the Corn Belt. Still chilly across the southeastern Canadian prairie. Still a busy storm track, by the way, with added, again, moisture gain, drought improvement, plus snow melt. We'll keep an eye on streams and rivers into the upper Midwest, Great Lakes region, and from there into the northeast to New England. Dry and certainly drought-ridden still over the southern plains, south southwestern reaches of the country. Precip about normal in the southeastern states.
Late spring, almost summertime. Greg, where do you see temperatures going? Does that warm-up trend continue?
Lots of summertime weather already gathering steam over the plain states, back across the southwestern reaches of the country. A little push of some cool air into the northeast of New England. Much of the country warm to hot, and still a busy weather pattern with probably some field work delays for the northern and eastern Corn Belt. Access into the western and southern complex, and high and dry from the plain states on westward.
The crop protection chemistry used on farms across this country is overseen by the EPA. But in recent years, trial attorneys have gotten involved with some specific ag chemistries, and that's prompting state legislatures to take action. How could this impact ag input suppliers? I talked with Martha Smith of the Modern Ag Alliance.
Yeah, the Modern Ag Alliance is a coalition that was formed earlier this year to help secure farmers' access to crop protection tools. And the alliance was founded by Bayer, but is supported by more than 85 groups from across the U.S. at both the federal and the state level. And this is including more than 24 different states.
So I was just going to ask, what sort of efforts are you working at the Modern Ag Alliance to keep in hand for farmers? How do we stabilize the industry?
Yeah, so the Modern Ag Alliance is seeking to drive awareness of the need for crop protection tools, and then to also partner with legislators across the U.S. and the states to have legislation introduced to solve some issues that have popped up around the labeling of crop protection tools. But really is important that I think those of us in agriculture, we know the role that crop protection tools play. We know the importance of a product such as glyphosate, but the general public doesn't always understand that. And our legislatures are made up a lot of times of people that don't have a farming background. And so the Modern Ag Alliance is seeking to educate on that, on the need again for those crop protection tools, but also really importantly about the labeling and the process for bringing crop protection tools to the market.
So what happens to America's farmers, particularly corn and soy farmers, if we don't stabilize some of these label decisions?
Yeah, and so let me maybe explain the situation of what's happening. So in the past few years, there's been millions of dollars spent by the litigation industry to create misunderstanding around what's happening with the labeling of products. And that millions of dollars in advertising has led to billions of dollars in litigation costs. And that's billions of dollars that could have been spent on R&D, on developing that next great technology to help farmers to be more successful. And so we're in a place right now where we need to get back to having clarity around who it is that has control over the labels in the U.S. And so historically we have viewed that as the EPA. EPA is who issues the label. I always like to tell people that I took a pesticide applicators exam earlier in my career. I passed it too. But the first thing you learn when you do that is that the label is the law. We all know that in agriculture, but there's just been this confusion that has been created lately about whether or not it is EPA or not. And so this legislation that the Modern Ag Alliance is supporting will seek to clarify that when it comes to human health effects and the safety of chemistries, it is the label from EPA that's the authority. It's okay if states want to add additional components. There's state-specific situations, but states shouldn't be directly conflicting the science, the rigorous, peer-reviewed science that is coming out of EPA.
Martha, this is a huge topic. As you mentioned, it's become a $1 billion plus topic over the past year. You've been working on this for a year. How's it been going? Do you feel as if the Modern Ag Alliance is having some success in the states where you've started?
We do feel like we had a good start to this process. So got going here earlier in this year, and we're active in legislatures in 3 states, in Missouri and Iowa, as well in Idaho, and now understand more about what's happening in other states and are looking forward to seeing if more legislators in other states decide to file these bills as well. But we were able to get through the House in Missouri and through the Senate in Iowa, but ran out of time to get through those other chambers. But look forward to hopefully being back this year, assuming legislatures do file these bills, and making another run at this. Because again, just making sure farmers continue to have confidence in the labels, but also to that point on the billions of dollars that's being spent on litigation. That's not a sustainable future for our industry. And so we really do want to make sure that farmers are able to continue to have access to a product such as glyphosate that is so important, not only for controlling weeds, but also for fueling conservation ag. And I know you know this, but again, not everyone does. Glyphosate is the cornerstone of no-till agriculture, which has been a game changer in the sense of what we do with sustainability in ag.
Martha, when you talk at the Modern Ag Alliance with legislators in these different states, what's the response so far? Are they willing to have these conversations?
I think so. I think legislators are concerned about food and availability of food in the U.S. And we've all seen what's gone on with food prices. We've seen what's happened with inflation. We saw the very clear mandate that the Trump administration got from the standpoint of the exit polls are showing that inflation is on people's minds. And so it's the same thing for state legislators. And so when they hear the connection that a crop protection tool has to not only, again, controlling weeds, but to that cost component for how a farmer is able to, from a cost-efficient standpoint, be able to control the weeds and also implement those conservation tillage type methods, that does appeal to a legislator, and they see that problem and want to be a part of the solution.
Is the Modern Ag Alliance looking to form partnerships with farmers to help tell these stories, Martha?
We welcome the involvement of all that are interested. We have a website that is controlweedsnotfarming.com. I would encourage people to go take a look at that. There's lots of information on what the Modern Ag Alliance is doing. There's state-specific information on there too, and there's also a section where you can write to your legislators and ask them to consider introducing and supporting legislation like this. But the other ask I would have is if a farmer is a member of an association who's not one of those 85 that has joined, we would welcome having additional members join and can reach out to us via the website.
Thank you, Martha. Folks, leave it here. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we return. Labor challenges, it seems, are everywhere in agriculture, but particularly so perhaps in California. Our own Lainey Beatsma recently had a chance to get the lay of the land out there in California, and she brings us that story now.
Wrapping up 2024 and leading us into this new year, Walt Dufluck, Senior Vice President of Innovations for Western Growers, dove into the challenges of labor and specialty crops in the U.S.
Yeah, it's bigger than people know. It's a lot of labor every year. It's about 850,000 unique farm workers every year, 425,000 full-time equivalent workers, right? So we pay as an industry $16.3 billion for 850 million hours of work all in every year.
Many different solutions to the problem of labor shortage, but let's talk about robots. How does that come in the mix? What is your vision for robots and taking place of labor in agriculture?
Yep. So 2/3 of that number, those hours, are harvest, and 1/3 of that number is other things, weeding, planting, spraying and stuff like that. So our goal is to automate where we can because the cost of that labor only goes up, right? So the robots that can weed can actually help replace some of the crews, and it's not even replace, it's really fill the gap that we already have because we don't have enough. And the reason we know we don't have enough is because domestic workers are drying up, and it's increasingly international labor that's more expensive because you have to house them, feed them, and transport them. And so what we do with robots is, as the cost pressure goes up, we try and robot our way into solving that problem with the weeding robots, with the thinning robots, with the planting robots and the spraying robots, because we just can't afford to watch the labor costs completely continue to go up. Right now, for domestic workforce, it's about $17.50 for California, but for international workers, it's closer to $30. It's really expensive.
So how do you connect growers with those robots and that automation?
So that's the job of the Western Growers Innovation Team. We get them involved with the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology in Salinas. We get them involved with things like Reservoir Farms, which is our new robotics incubator that we launched. So the robotics incubator gives the ability to have not just the robots being R&D'd and built in places, but it's actually in places that are near fields. So this has been the nice big thing, and we're just getting this off the ground now. We launched it a couple weeks ago at Ferry USA in Yolo County. We want to have a robot incubator in Merced and a robot incubator in Salinas Valley working on Merced crops and Salinas crops, where we can literally say, build your robot, walk steps away and test your robot, and then when the robot gets done and built right, show it off and demo it at that acreage you're already on top of that you've signed a membership deal to be part of, and you can basically do FIRA exhibits 24/7, 365 at Reservoir Farms.
What do you think will happen if we can't automate things to solve this labor problem?
This is the big problem that we finally figured out the answer to. For years, I've been telling people in Sacramento and DC, if you don't help us automate and give us funding to help us get the startups commercialized and scaled out faster, bad things are going to happen. And we finally figured out the bad things that are going to happen are that acreage is going to leave California and go to Peru even faster than it already is.
What can California policymakers do to help the automation solutions move forward faster?
I would say there's a couple things. First of all, help us keep the acreage here, right? We're on pace. I've done the math. We're forecasted to lose 9 million acres of California ag land over 55 years from 1997 to 2052, and 45,000 farmers, over half our farmers. We don't want that to happen. So the way to stop that from happening is give us more water storage, give us a better energy policy so it's cheaper and readily available, give us some more labor-friendly policies, and give us a further repeal to things like PAGA, the Private Attorney General Act. Keep the attorneys off the farms, because they just come out and they come out and they ask for an awful lot of money with these PAGA lawsuits. And so all of those together, water, energy, labor policy, and PAGA, would be great to see some action going that way, because right now Peru is doing the opposite. They're investing in water storage. They're putting in a brand new port. Port of Los Angeles is very outdated, very non-automated, very unionized, and Peru's got the entire opposite down there. So they're going to have a nice efficient port with plenty of water and plenty of cheap energy. We have none of that in California right now. That's not helping. And until we get some of that changed, people are looking at the business going, I'm paying $30 an hour for California labor. I'm paying $4 to $5 an hour in Peru. There's only so much math you can do before you figure out I should at least go down there and take a look.
That's Walt Dufluck with the Western Growers, talking about the challenges with the labor industry for organic agriculture, but also those upcoming opportunities. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Lainey Beatsma.
Thank you, Lainey and Walt, for that conversation. There's a lot happening in the world of agriculture in 2024. Thank you all for joining us here today. Be sure to catch us next time, right here for This Week in Agribusiness. Have a Happy New Year, everybody.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.